Hi, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show. And this is going to be episode 2 of a new series that I thought of, and I think it's pretty good. Reunion albums. So what do I mean by reunion albums? These are bands that broke up and then got back together after a while. Or a reunion of an original lineup, possibly. Or maybe a band that really didn't break up, but they just were in nowhere's land because they got dumped by their record company and eventually they were able to get an album released. That's the idea. So they really are kind of like true reunion albums. My episode 1, I did looked at my collection and I went through from A through C, the letters, and instead of just keep going, we'll mix it up. Let's go to the end of the alphabet, and I got like T through W. What the hell? So let's start. And I think we're going to start at the top. Quite possibly the best, biggest reunion. It's only one one person, but it's definitely a reunion. And that's Tina Turner. So Tina Turner, 1975, she did the Tommy movie, and she was the Acid Queen. But ever since I Can Tina Turner, she was really lost. She had released some records, R&B type solo albums that nobody was buying, basically, and she was playing cabarets, hotels, really in like nowhere's land. 1981, she got a gig opening up for the Rolling Stones at the Brendan Byrne Arena in New Jersey. I saw that show, and Tina Turner was amazing. Absolutely amazing. What a performance. I remember it, one of the greatest opening acts ever. She actually came out and sang with the Stones. Also in 1981, she wound up joining Rod Stewart on a live televised concert he was pretty big at the time. Tonight Is Yours was the album. And he did a TV simulcast, and he had Tina Turner come out, I think on Hot Legs. Anyway, I have a Laserdisc of that concert. So, with the help of Mick Jagger, Rod Stewart, she was starting to get some pickup again. And then, but that was still like 81. 83, she was really working on Private Dancer, and then it came out. And with the help of Mark Knopfler, who wrote the title track, and just an astounding job by the record company, Capitol Records. I mean, it's easy to look at it now and say, but no, I mean, she was really an R&B artist. She was playing, nowhere. And they backed her and reinvented her as a pop rock singer. What's Love Got to Do with It? Put it together with some great songwriters and great tracks on here. A couple of great covers. She did the Bowie cover in 1981. And this album was huge. And Tina Turner never looked back, especially overseas. In the U.S., she was big, but overseas, man, through a whole career, when she came back, she was playing gigantic stadiums. I have Laserdiscs of Tina Turner concerts. She's playing in front of like 70,000 people. So I did a video when she passed away as a tribute video. Quite a talent, and really one of the greatest comebacks in the history of rock. Tina Turner, 1983, Private Dancer. This is truly a reunion album for sure. Let's keep going. How about this one, the letter T? This is an interesting one. The band Television. So Television released 2 great albums, really influential, really famous. Marquee Moon, which is a classic. These are beautiful CDs, by the way, remastered with bonus tracks. Really nice. And the second one was Adventure. It came out in 78. And another one of those bands that didn't sell a lot of records, but everybody claims to be influenced by them. A really good band. I actually think this album is almost as good as Marquee Moon. But that was the end of Television in 1978. And then what happened is you had like Nirvana, and, all of a sudden all these really famous punk bands from the 70s started reuniting, Blondie, whatever, thinking maybe they can get another life. And Television did the same thing. And in 1992, they released the self-titled album Television. So this truly was, they reunited and put this album out. It's a pretty good record. Honestly, I don't think it compares to either of these albums. But it's okay. What was it? Calling Mr. Lee was a single. To me, it's actually more of a Tom Verlaine solo record with the Television name. But it is what it is. Pretty decent. Television. That's a good reunion example. And let's keep going. Steve Harold, one of the world's big Van Halen fans. I don't actually consider myself a big Van Halen fan, although I have every David Lee Roth album, and I think that stuff is great. I was never into the Sammy Hagar years. But as we know with Van Halen, 1984 was the last album they did with David Lee Roth. Classic album, changed their sound, keyboards, etc. Huge, huge hit, as all the Van Halen albums were. Then they did Van Hagar and other stuff, and they splintered. And lo and behold, in 2012, 1984 to 2012, that's 28 years, Van Halen gets back together again with David Lee Roth, and they put out this album, A Different Kind of Truth. This is a version that's got a bonus DVD in there. So I was kind of interested in that. I heard the song Tattoo, thought that was really good. And the story was a lot of this album was they redid like early demos from when they first started. So it's just kind of a clever idea. But be completely honest with you, I've heard this album 3 or 4 times at the time, or 5 times. And I haven't really listened to it since, and I just don't find it very memorable. But Tattoo is a good song. I actually saw them live when they reformed with David Lee Roth, and I didn't really care for them. So sorry, Steve, but there you go. That's 28-year reunion right there. A Different Kind of Truth from Van Halen with David Lee Roth. Here's an interesting one, really interesting one. The Velvet Underground. So Velvet Underground, their last album of the Velvet Underground was 1970, which is this one called Loaded. Now, they had changes throughout their career. You know, John Cale left after the second album, White Light, White Heat. They did the self-titled Velvet Underground with Doug Yule, which I love that album. That is a more mellow, melodic record. And Doug Yule came in to play bass, and I think he was a pretty important part of the band, because I think that third Velvet Underground album is great. All their albums are great. Then they came back the following year, 1970, and did Loaded. They dropped, or got dropped by their record label. They went to Atlantic with Ahmet Ertegun, put this album out. Why did they call it Loaded? And this is the deluxe edition, fully loaded edition. They called it Loaded because they said it was loaded with hits. And in fact, it kind of is. It just didn't happen. On this album, the 2 most famous songs, which is Rock and Roll and Sweet Jane, came from this album. And of course, a lot of people know from the Lou Reed solo years, the Lou Reed live album with the great guitar solo done by Dick Wagner. But this is the original album. This is my most played Velvet Underground album. It's just an easy listening for the Velvet Underground. Catchy stuff. Great stuff. And Doug Yule is all over this album. He is, in my opinion, sorely underappreciated in the history of the Velvet Underground. He didn't even get inducted into the Hall of Fame with them, and he was all over the third album and all over this album. And in fact, he sings like Who Loves the Sun is him on vocals. New Age, one of the greatest rock songs of all time. Doug Yule is singing that as well. Sings 2 other ones. I think Oh Sweet Nothing is him, and maybe Lonesome Cowboy Bill, if I remember right. But this is a great album, right? And that was the end of the Velvet Underground in 1970. Lo and behold, what happens? 1993. 23 years later, the band reunites, the original band. So we're talking Lou Reed, John Cale, Mo Tucker on drums, and Sterling Morrison. And by the way, Mo Tucker is credited on drums on this album. She clearly is not playing it. Doug Yule, who we were just talking about, plays guitar and bass on this. He also plays drums on a lot of the songs. And I think his brother Bill Yule played drums as well. So Doug Yule, real musician. You can tell it's not Mo Tucker because this is real drums. Mo Tucker plays more like a percussion style that nobody sounds like that. Anyway, she's back, and they released this album live 1993. This is the 2 CD version, and they tour Europe. They open up for U2 on that massive tour, and their plan is to go to the United States and play, but they break up again. Fighting between John Cale and Lou Reed, it wasn't going to last. So this was their reunion right there. They came back, and talk was they would do another album, but it didn't make it. But it's an interesting live record. It's not one that I listen to much. There's also a single disc version of it. This was recorded live in Paris. Great set list. And they do sound good. Not great, but good. Though when I want to listen to the Velvet Underground live, I go with the other live records. One more. As you probably know, if you know my channel, I'm a huge Wishbone Ash fan, and this was a good story. So they formed in 1970. 1980, they did the Just Testing album. That was their 10-year anniversary album. And this was the last album they did as this foursome. This was the Mach 2 version with Laurie Weisfeld, Andy Powell, Martin Turner, and Steve Upton. The album wasn't a huge hit for them. After 10 years, they were starting to fracture. The following year, in 1988, they did Number the Brave, which brought in John Wetton just on the album. This is a fantastic Wishbone Ash album. Love this album. Doesn't really get the respect it deserves. But John Wetton was brought in just to play bass. He wasn't going to be a permanent member. So now they had fractured. This album didn't do that well. And now they're kind of floating around. 1982, they start trying to get into the new wave of British heavy metal. They released Twin Barrels Burning, 2 different album covers of this one. And another lineup. This one actually has Trevor Bolder on bass from Bowie and Uriah Heep. Fine record, but it's a harder sound than Wishbone Ash. After that, they bring in Mervyn Spence. They do Raw to the Bone, which is a really heavy metal kind of record. And then they're kind of done. So it was kind of exciting to me that in 1988, their original manager decides to get them back together, and he redoes, that's Miles Copeland, and they do he puts out the IRS record label, and he convinces them to put out an album that's all instrumental because he's doing an all instrumental series. And they do this album called Nouveau Calls, which also says no vocals, if you look at it that way. And this is a fantastic instrumental album. Now, it does have some of that late 80s kind of techno sound to it, but this is my most played instrumental album of all time. More than Jeff Beck, more than jazz albums. Not saying it's the best, but for me, it's the most played. I love this Wishbone Ash album. Beautiful melodies, great tunes. You know, check out, Real Guitars Have Wings, A Rose is a Rose, A Spirit Flies High. There's so many. This is a great album. Great instrumental album. And this was thrilled. I still listen to this album all the time, and that was a great reunion featuring Ted Turner and Andy Powell and Martin Turner and Steve Upton, the original Mach 1 band. They would last for one more album, which was a regular album called Here to Here. That one had vocals, a regular Wishbone Ash album. A fine record. It's good. It's definitely a solid record. And then they would do one more after that. By then, Steve Upton, the drummer, left, and they had 2 drummers filling in. Another one called Strange Affair. This is also a really good record. Check out things like Standing in the Rain, and the title track on Wings of Desire is fantastic. Some Conversations of Beauty. This is a really good record, too. And then they would just splinter forever, Wishbone Ash, with a lot of different layouts. So there you go. Some 5 more reunion albums that I think are all interesting. The Tina Turner, an all-time classic, of course. Nouveau Calls, no vocals, Wishbone Ash. If you like instrumental rock albums, check that one out. It's really good. And then you got the televisions, kind of The Van Halen one, kind of And the Velvet Underground is interesting, but certainly not something I would play very often. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your opinions, and I'll keep doing this series of reunion albums. So what do I got? T through W now, and A through C, and there'll be more to come. I hope you're enjoying it. Kind of an interesting concept. I hope you agree. Check out my other videos, including the other reunion video if you haven't seen it. Hit subscribe if you're new. And welcome to the Alan Rosenberg Show if you're new. And if you're a loyal subscriber and watcher, you know, and I hope you know that I really appreciate your support and love your comments. Stay safe, stay healthy. See you on the next video.